Because is it a meme?
There's some behind.
I mean, I learned it way through like.
Yeah,
but it
like,
doesn't
but
mean
that's
it's
how we
gonna
learned it, and now
help.
it's like the joke. They didn't teach us taxes, but you taught us about the mitochondria.
You know, and that's funny. Like they didn't teach us how to, balance a checkbook or pay bills or, finance good credit. But by God, we know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
That's pretty much.
Because that's come in super handy on multiple occasions in my adult life. It really has. Finessing, having a pipe burst in my house for the first time in my adult life, having to find a reputable plumber and then a contractor and doing all of that by myself, negotiating my insurance company. I can't tell you how helpful it was to have the knowledge that the mitochondria was in fact the powerhouse of the cell. That piece of information really kept me alive and kept me going through some pretty hard times. We do have some other parts that we are going to be discussing. Cells, okay, we've already discussed the skin, which is the cell membrane. Now that we're moving in, cells really are created very similar to you as a complex being. Cells have a skeleton. They have multiple components to their skeleton. Some components are fixed. Some components are able to be broken down and moved. And we're going to talk to, in fact, 3 different types of parts to the cytoskeleton. The inside of the cell we already discussed has the cytosol, which is just like it's jelly. This is just gelatin that everything else is floating around in. It's the stapler in the jello. They have organs. In fact, they're tiny organs because we know that the suffix L means tiny. Organelle is a tiny organ. Cells, you guys know by now I anthropomorphize everything. I find it easier to learn if I can put a little personality on them. But they really do. An individual microscopic cell has an organelle that functions very similar to your kidneys, and one that functions very similar to your stomach, and one that functions very similar to your digestive system and your immune system, and the production and breakdown and buildup of different proteins. And then, of course, we have a brain, which is the nucleus. I mean, obviously, I'm simplifying it, but ultimately, the nucleus kind of functions as the brain. It is what holds all of the blueprints and all of the instructions. And then finally, we have inclusions. And all an inclusion is a void. Now, there are a lot of different reasons why we would have a void. Some of these inclusions are specifically meant to go and engulf little foreign invaders and just hold them in jail until we can kill them and get rid of them. Other inclusions help to move stuff through the cell. They're little transport inclusions. So when we say the word inclusion, all I'm referring to is there's a void for some reason in the cell. And so we're just going to go through and discuss the function and the components of these parts of the cell. It's really very beautiful and really pretty cool how you have how many billions upon trillions of cells in your body. And they all have the same basic makeup for the most part, at least our nucleated cells do. We do have some cells that are non-nucleated. They don't really have the same components. So I call those the stupid cells. Not that they're not smart. I mean, they're keeping me alive right now, which is a lot smarter than if I had to do all the stuff they're doing. Sure, I'd be dead. There's no way. But we do have some cells that have such a rudimentary, fundamental, singular job. We don't need all of this. We don't need it. Their job is programmed. It's almost like your Roomba. You push one button, what does it do? Is it cooking you meals? No. Is it accessing the internet? Unless you have one of the super fancy Alexa ones, probably not. You push the button, it vacuums, and then it goes back to where it goes. Those are the stupid cells. They don't need a major computer chip and all this other Stotsky stuff to do their job. We're talking about super fancy cells. So the cytosol, as I said, is the fluid of the cell. It's this jelly-like fluid, really pretty sticky. Although you're never going to get the benefit of like touching it or putting it on your fingers, because obviously the amount of cytosol in a single cell is so microscopic. You would really have to drain most of your cells of cytosol to have any amount that you could manipulate. So we just kind of take the scientist word for it that it is sticky. The way that we know that is mainly the way that other things inside of it are able to maneuver. So the way that our organelles, our tiny organs, kind of float and manipulate through tells us that it's kind of sticky, almost like quicksand. It's semi-transparent. We know this because we can see the organelles through it. If it wasn't transparent, all of your cells would look cloudy and we wouldn't be able to see or identify any of this other stuff. And it's made with primarily a protein substance. And its job is to help maintain the shape of the cell while allowing the cell to change shape without destroying the cell. Think about a loosely filled water balloon. Okay, I've got a balloon, I've filled it with water and it's jiggly. And I can like just hold it and you can identify its round shape as a balloon. But now what happens? I squeeze it. And like now it's popping out of both. I've manipulated the shape, but have I done any damage to the cell? I have not. If I tried to fill this cell with something else, this balloon with something else like sand, if I had something granular, I now have it as a round, but what happens when I squeeze that and let it go? It stays. I want something that is going to very easily maneuver back into its original shape. That's why we have this jelly-like substance made of proteins. And everything just floats around in there. Do. And so that's the cytosol, the jelly. I'll give you guys a minute. You're furiously writing. Don't panic. Don't panic. You guys still doing body fluids?
We finished that.
You just finished? Hey, what kind of cell, remind me, what kind of cell makes mucus? Yeah, say it louder.
The gauntlet.
Oh.
Ah, that was the good chewy snot mucus. Because you didn't remember, that's why.
I got purposely didn't remember that.
Oh, come on. I think we as humans need to admit we all have some similarities. Humans are disgusting. There's a reason why you're going into animal medicine. People are gross. But you all have done this once, and if you say you haven't, I call you a liar to your face. Where you choked up, you coughed up, and you now have it in your mouth, and you're like, oh, wow, what is that? And you either spit it into a tissue so you can take a better look, or you just sit and play with it in your tongue a little bit.
No.
Yes.
The second one, no.
The second one, yes, I call you a liar to your face. Yeah, or you hawk up the great, like, giant one, like you were convinced part of your lung, and you spit it out, and then you just kind of sit and
Oh.
like poke it.
I read that stuff.
Just poke it, just to see. Say thank you. You are now in favor with the queen because you have admitted. The rest of you who are saying no, I call you liars to your
You
face.
got it to see if you're sick. You don't like to touch it.
Oh yeah, you should touch it. Touch it.
Bring it.
I'll bring it to you next time.
Bring it.
Yeah, see, it sticks.
I think that's called like hopping a loogie or something.
Yeah, have the lady.
Whatever you want to call it, it's coughing up a big chunk of mucus from your goblet cell and taking a look at it. And then playing with it a little bit before you throw it away or swallow it. I still have to figure out what exactly it is that wakes you guys up. What argument do I have to pose to wake you up? With my Onyx, I could always wake them up when they were super stoic. And I don't normally talk to cohorts about other cohorts. It's not, I don't want to do that, but they're very lovely. Anything I would bring up food related.
I was gonna say food.
Oh Lord. Like the day that I told them I hated cornbread, holy smokes, you would have thought I had kicked a puppy up here on stage.
I don't like it either.
I don't like it. It's disgusting. It's corny. Ah, it's made of corn. It's gross.
So you don't
But-
like those corn nuggets?
I don't. No. No. It's gross.
What's your
And-
opinion on fried okra? That's the real stuff, I think.
No, I don't care for that. My significant other adores fried okra. I don't care for it.
You need okra.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I know the thing to wake you up as well. All I had to say was I hate cornbread, and look at this. I have full discussion. I don't even want to know what the chat looks like right now. All right, so let's talk about the cytoskeleton. Functions the exact same way your skeleton does. It gives shape, it helps with movement, and it anchors other stuff to it. That's exactly what we're dealing with here. I know these words are a little bit small, but we'll just go through this. Some of the parts are able to be broken down very easily and reassembled in other places. Now, the big difference, obviously, between this cytoskeleton and my skeleton is very rigid. It is there for protection. It is there to ratchet my muscles to help provide movement. If my bones were all cooked spaghetti, they wouldn't offer any resistance and I would not have any movement. Because it is the stability of the skeleton that allows my muscles something for torque. We are put together ultimately like a puppet. I have my bicep right here. Bicep attaches here at the shoulder, and it does, we don't often think about, but my bicep actually attaches way down here below my elbow. And when I go and I flex this bicep, I'm going to pretend I've now attached a string. And watch what happens when I flex. It causes a movement. Same thing here. I have my tricep that attaches way down here. And when I pull that one, it causes a movement. Now my cell skeleton is not that rigid because my cells do need to be able to change shape pretty dramatically. So they're not rigid, and the majority of our types of cytoskeleton are not permanent. I can reassemble them in other areas. Kind of like a baby.
Their bones are fully developed.
Yeah, I mean, but they're still pretty rigid and they're still pretty static. You're not gonna have a baby arm like migrate over onto its head. That would be cool though. These are more like, for example, we know the one organelle we know, the mitochondria. Well, if I have an area on the other whole side of the cell, I mean, consider this like a planet, a tiny planet or a tiny country. And on the entire other end of the country is where I need more power. I need to have a way to get my mitochondria over there. And so I just reassemble a road. And my mitochondria are able to use it to maneuver themselves to the other side of the cell. And so that's why we need this to be able to reassemble. It's also going to help to anchor our organelles because our organelles are just floating around in the cytosol. I need to be able to anchor them so that they can perform their job in the area that they need to perform it. Think of like a boat that is not tied up. It's just going to float away willy-nilly. I need to keep the boat where I need to keep the boat. So I need something to anchor it to. We have 3 different components to our cytoskeleton, and this is what I like to call the creepy rule of 3. Anatomy, for whatever reason, a lot of our structures, a lot of our dog and cat structures come in 3s. And I call it the creepy rule of 3. Because as we go through this anatomy class, more often than not, if I say, how many of this thing do you think there are? Chances are, if you say 3, you're going to be right. So we have 3 primary parts to my cytoskeleton. We have my microtubules, small tubes, right? Use your med term. Small tubes. And they're made of this stuff called tubulin, which is the stuff that just simply makes tubes. And these are the largest and most, not most permanent, they're the largest component. Because we got Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear of our skeletal system for our cells. Mama bears are intermediate fibers, and again, med term, intermediate means in the middle. And then we have our microfilament, and a filament, think of a filament inside a light bulb. Very thin, very delicate. And so these are the 3. Microtubules are the largest of our cytoskeleton. Intermediate is going to be the middle part of our skeleton, or in size-wise, size of the fibers. And then our microfilament, filament being the smallest of all of our fibers. I don't remember, I think I put a video over the cytoskeleton, linked it to my website. So if you did what I asked and watched the 2 videos, one was the Khan Academy that went over kind of the basics behind these cytoskeletons. So we'll just go over, not in great detail, but just in general, the 3 functions of these cytoskeletons. I'll give you guys a minute. Don't want to go too fast. Hey, what group of dogs are you doing right now? The hounds. Does anyone else have a family tradition of watching the dog show on Thanksgiving? Only a few of you?
I watch it after the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
Yes, that is my family.
Me too.
Well, I say family. Me and my SO watch the Macy's Day Parade, and then we watch the dog show every year. And it's fabulous. I love it. I love the dog show. And it's really great because you now having knowledge are going to be able to, it's kind of fun as they pan through the dogs for you to try and name them before they do. And
There's a new show coming on about breeders competing, and it'll be on, I think it comes on the 30th of March.
Okay. There's also, before pre-COVID, there's the Houston Dog Show that comes every year. That is so fabulous. So if we ever get out of this stupid pandemic and return to life, at least relative to what we knew it as, if you ever get a chance, it's fabulous. Now, it's not, some of it is confirmation where you have like your best in group, best in breed, best in show. But they also have like agility tryouts. They have dog dancing competitions, which are very funny. They have scent hound competitions where they have this little area and they have tubes that they hide rodents in, like live rats, and they'll hide it, and the dog has to go in and find all of the rats in a certain period of time. And the vendors, oh, Lord, save your wallets. I don't even want to tell you how much money my significant other spent the last time we went. Holy smokes. He has a slight addiction to dog beds. Just gonna say. I have 7. I own 2 dogs. I have 7 dog beds in my house.
You like sleeping in different places all the time.
They do, but
How many dogs do you have?
I have 2 dogs. I have 2 dogs and I have 7 dog beds. And I have 1 dog that doesn't sleep on the dog bed. She sleeps in bed with me.
Yeah, we have 2 cat trees and like, I don't know, like a dozen little huts around the house. And they only ever sleep like on the chair or on the floor.
I know. He has a
Miss up, they said on chat to get more dogs for the dog bed.
you know what, I would, but so my stepdog is slightly dog aggressive. And so I can't get any more dogs because she would not be happy with it. So can't do that. I fostered a couple for a while. One of them was nearly a failed foster. God, I love that dog. Oh, I loved her so much, but she did not, Jenny did not get along with her. And she was a little pitty, so that's definitely not a breed you want to escalate. So, but someday I'll have a whole house full. All right, so let's talk about microtubules. Tiny tube made of tubulin. These are the thickest of the fibers. This is the Papa Bear of the fibers. And these are going to grow cables that our organelles are able to attach to. They are the largest and most robust, and they're going to allow to form tracks that our organelles can move around. Now, the really cool thing about these microtubules.
You said that there was, what did you start off by saying? I didn't get that very first part of it. You said there was 2 tiny tubes and what else? Prevalent, you said?
So we have our microtubules, which are the largest and made of tubulin. So it's not just called a microtubule because it's a tube. It's also called a tubule because it's made up of this stuff called tubulin. And tubulin is very easy to break down and reassemble. Think of like super loose Legos. And this is what allows us to maneuver and replace it so that our anchored organelles can use it as a track to move around the cell. And so this is the largest, and these are going to grow out from the center out to the cytoskeleton and provide a really, really great little track system for our organelles to transport themselves. So the big stuff to remember, these are the thickest fibers, and they are used as a track for organelles to move around. They are easily assembled and disassembled. Those are the 3 main points that you should take away from this slide. Can you repeat that? Yeah, so the 3 main points, they are the thickest fiber. They provide a track for organelles to anchor to and maneuver and have movement throughout the cell. And they can be very easily disassembled and reassembled. Those are the 3 main points when we are discussing our microtubules. Tube. And if you have not already watched it, I have linked a fabulous video by Khan Academy that outlines and shows you a actual photo from an electron microscope that he outlines all of these different cytoskeleton components and kind of explains a little bit about them. So if you need to go back and have just an additional resource, I have gone through, and that is a really great video. Give you guys a minute. So you guys are learning all about the difference in your scent hounds and your sight hounds. Fabulous. I do like that.
What were the 3 ones that we needed?
What was that? I'm sorry, Zoomer.
What were the 3 ones that we needed for the slide?
Again, the microtubules are the thickest of our cytoskeleton fibers. They provide a track for our organelles to anchor to and move through the cell, and they are easily assembled and disassembled. Those
Okay,
are
thank
the
you.
3. No worries. Those are the 3 main points that we want to take away from microtubule. So if you're doing the hounds, that means you've already done the oldest and most primitive known breed, which would be, it's one of the hound groups.
Oh, we just started.
Oh, you just started, okay, this would be going on.
Yeah,
So
we-
one
we
of the
had
most-
beetle.
One of the most primitive known breeds is the Saluki.
Yeah, we're still in bees.
Our note says Greyhound was kind of easier.
Greyhound is a sighthound, so they're part of the same category. The Saluki, though, can be traced back all the way to ancient Egypt. So I'm going to say, if your book says Greyhound, answer that on a test, but if you want the real answer, it's Saluki. All right, so our intermediate fibers, these are kind of the mid-sized fibers. These are going to have a very high, what we call tensile strength. These act as what we refer to as guy wires. Now, you probably don't know the term guy wires, but you have in fact seen them. Right here, when we're looking at, like if you have a tree, and you have wires connecting to the ground on this end and wires on the opposite end, pulling in opposite directions to hold the tree firm and stable. Those are guy wires. And that's kind of what these intermediate fibers are doing. They're internal guy wires that are helping to maintain shape and stability. The other thing to take away is they are the toughest and most permanent. These do not get disassembled. These are functioning very similar to your actual skeleton, providing support. We don't want them to disassemble. So our intermediate fibers are the most permanent part. And then depending on what kind of cell they are in, they'll take on different names. So just as examples, a tonofilament, this is an intermediate fiber in epithelial cells. Neurofilament, neuro meaning brain, so those are the guy wires in our nerve cells. But the points to take away, once again, high tensile strength, internal guy wires, meaning that they are providing stability by having opposing, what's the word I'm looking for? Not pull. When you have one pulling this way and one pulling this way, they're opposed pulling, holding it stable. Not necessarily polar. I will think of it. I need Doug to get off of this and just stop thinking about it. They don't get disassembled. They are the most permanent part of our cytoskeleton. And then depending on what kind of cell, they can take on different names.
So does that mean that they're like super flexible if they don't disassemble?
So they're the most rigid, but obviously because our cell is changing shape, they're very flexible in comparison to your skeleton. They're the most rigid of all of the cytoskeleton components, but still pretty flexible in comparison to yours. Because if I take you and fold you up flat and try and shove you under a door, you're not going to come out the other side looking all that great. Cells have to do that all the time. So you're absolutely right compared to you. Comments, questions, concerns so far? So
What did
all
you
we've
say
done-
guy wires were again?
So when I say a guy wire, if you I've planted a tree. And sometimes with a brand new tree, they'll put a little collar on it and you'll have a wire holding it here and then you'll have an opposite wire holding it here. And those opposite pulls stabilize the tree. That's what I'm talking about. This is called a guy wire. I don't know why it's called a guy wire, but it is called a guy wire where we have opposite pull, opposite tensile strength holding the tree stable. We've also seen them like down here on like power lines, the power poles, and you see the tension. That's what these are.
Like a counterbalance?
Like a what?
Like a counterbalance?
Like a counterbalance. We've got strength going, pull going one way, pull going the other way, and it keeps the tree up nice and straight. That's what we're referring to when we say a guy wire.
So for me, in my mind, I can kind of say like a tug of war.
You can say a what? Sorry, sweetheart, you cut out.
Like a game of tug of war.
Similar to a game of tug of war that nobody wins. Because both teams are exactly evenly matched.
Okay.
Do what?
I thought she said Tupperware at first.
I did too.
So I was like, oh,
Boy, we're just mishearing everything today.
You completely broke up.
So somebody was mentioning that instead of tug of war, they thought you said Tupperware. And so we're about to start a lovely discussion on Tupperware.
Our Doug's all got off topic.
Everybody's Doug has gone completely off topic today. Doug's gone rogue. So we've now gone over 2 of the 3 cytoskeleton components. We've done the microtubules, the largest, the widest part of our cytoskeleton that can be easily disassembled and reassembled, allowing for our organelles to move around the cell. We have our intermediate fibers, which are smaller, but more permanent. They don't get easily broken down, and they are providing stability for the cell like internal little guy wires. And then finally, we have the intermediate fibers, or I'm sorry, not intermediate fibers, the microfilaments. We just talked about the intermediate fibers. I'm telling you, Doug is not on the wheel this morning. My goodness, I haven't had enough Diet Coke. My dogs woke me up early and it's got me all discombobulated. So the third and final smallest component is our microfilament. Filament, again, I think of the tiny little delicate wire inside a light bulb. That's called a filament. So these are going to be located closest to the cell surface. And these are going to provide the cell stability when it's specifically changing shape. So the big thing to take away here with our microfilaments, it is the smallest, most delicate portion of our cytoskeleton, located closest to our cell surface, and it's going to play a key role in our cell's ability to change shape. And in fact, these microfilaments are made of 2 types of protein. You may or may not have heard of these before. I'm going to go ahead and throw them out there just so you've heard them. Actin and myosin. Actin and myosin are 2 proteins that are known for their ability to change shape and manipulate the shape of larger structures. All of your skeletal muscles are made of actin and myosin. They are 2 proteins that kind of fit together like this. And when your muscle contracts, it's these 2 proteins gliding over each other and interacting with each other that allows your muscle to contract and shorten and thicken. actin and myosin. So whenever you hear the words actin and myosin protein, you should immediately think change shape. Because think of dramatically your muscles change shape when you are causing the movement of things. So these microfilaments change shape. The cell's activity will also determine how many we have and where. Well, that makes sense. Cells that don't need to change their shape are not going to need a whole lot of filaments. Cells whose whole entire job is to do nothing but change its shape are going to need a lot more of these. So microfilament changing shape because of the makeup of the proteins actin and myosin. Did that make sense to everybody? Have you guys heard the term actin and myosin before? Some of you are nodding, some of you are shaking. That's okay. That's okay. And those are the three components of our cytoskeleton. What questions can I answer for you about any of these three components?
Did you say they're small and did you say they're breakable?
They're not breakable. They are very pliable, but they are the smallest and most delicate portion of our cytoskeleton. The key is they're found more towards the surface of the cell, which would make sense because if their job is to help the cell change shape, I'm going to need them to be located primarily at the point where the cell is changing shape, and that would be the cell membrane. They can disassemble and reassemble as needed, and depending on how much the cell needs to change its shape will determine how many of these do we have. If I have a cell that does not change its shape all that much, I don't need these. If I have a cell that its entire job is to change its shape, then obviously I'm going to have way more of these.
Can you repeat the term?
Yeah, so the three main keys of our microfilaments, they are located closer to the cell surface. They are predominantly responsible for changing the cell's shape. They are made of the proteins actin and myosin. Actin and myosin, anytime you hear the words actin and myosin, you should immediately think something's changing a shape. And then depending on the amount of shape change that I need will determine how many of these filaments do I have. And that's the microfilament. So we had our microtubule, intermediate fiber, microfilament. Papa Bear is microtubule, the largest organelle anchors to it, disassemble, reassemble. Intermediate, stability, guy wires, providing security and integrity of the cell shape. Finally, we had our microfilaments that are specifically for changing the shape, made of actin and myosin. What other questions can I answer for you before we move on? All right. Crawfish is also disgusting.
What? You drew the line.
What? Oh my God, mud bugs?
What blasphemy?
No, I don't eat anything like that. I don't eat seafood at all.
Oh, she's Canadian.
What the holy heck does that have to do with the price of beans?
Are you from this planet?
What do I eat? Well, there are only like an infinite other foods other than seafood. Seafood? No, can't do it. Now, I can every now and then, maybe once or twice a year, I get a craving for a good English fish and chips. like a nice.
Worst.
Yeah.
That's not the one to
But
get.
no, you have to go to the right place. Like you're not going to Long John Silver's and
Yeah.
getting a fish and chips. No, hard no. Yuck.
Yeah.
No, you got to go to the pub.
Yeah, exactly,
You got to go, like there's one off Westheimer called the is it the Bull and the Bear?
Oh,
Little Scottish pub right there by Specs. Oh, Scotch eggs for days.
Is there a reason you don't like
Honestly, it's a texture thing.
Okay, what is it? It's soft boiled egg. And then breaded.
And deep fried.
Yeah.
Oh, they're fabulous. And you can order them where they're a little bit more hard boiled because I don't like my eggs runny. So I do a hard boiled Scotch egg. Oh, see, this
Miss
is,
Huff, I have,
you guys up right now.
And like I was fried crumbles and stuff.
So
Do you-
yeah, for me, it's a texture and a smell thing. I'm highly, highly texture oriented. And so there's a lot of foods I've tried them, like lobster.
but you eat first.
I don't understand the whole thing about lobster. I got it to about here and just went, yeah, no. I don't. And so it's, oh God, no. Wait a minute. Whoa. I'm gonna call shenanigan pants on you for just a second. You're disgusted when I'm talking about snot, and yet you are voluntarily eating something of the same consistency, slurping it down your gullet like snot.
So good.
I can't remember.
I call shenanigans. I call shenanigan pants on you.
It's like you eat it, you might as well go like that.
You might as well just be swallowing that chunky snot.
If it's like coming from you, it's different.
I would think that if it was coming from me, it would be far better than eating something else.
I gotta see it. I wanna see it. Big difference.
My
I
goodness.
saw it, it was going down.
All right. See, now I know the hot button topic is just tell you something I don't like. But yeah, Bull and the Bear has lovely beer battered, but it's true English. There's a big difference between beer, like bar fish, which is disgusting, and a true English fish and chips. The batter is like paper thin and enhances the flavor. It's not, it shouldn't be crunchy and like this thick.
Yeah, that's what I don't like.
No. Bull and the Bear has a lovely, nice, but it's more of a Scottish than an
Yeah.
English. Is it not Einstein's? Sherlock, not Sherlock's. No. Is it Einstein's? Down by Highway 6 and I-10. There's a nice English bar pub. Has pretty good fish and chips.
Now, question, what type of fish is it?
Usually halibut or haddock.
Ah,
I prefer the halibut, but most places serve it as haddock.
that's so hot.
I don't care for the other like cod because it's too fishy.
Ah.
I can't do it. It's a tactile smell thing.
Okay.
All right, so now that I've woken everybody up with my hatred of crawfish, which apparently is a hot button topic in here for some reason.
I'll eat the other stuff. but
No, I can't do it.
Too much work for two.
I'll tell you a funny story about it later.
I mean,
All right, so what we have here is a picture. So I've got a small little cut section of my cell. This is the cell membrane. Okay, this is the outside of the cell. Now, obviously, we don't have the complexity. It's just the cell membrane, the plasma membrane. What we're concentrating on is in here. So what we have here, let's go from smallest to largest. These tiny woven spaghetti fibers right here at the surface of the cell are the microfilaments. They can weave, unweave, and reweave depending on the shape. Here, we have our intermediate fibers. Remember, these are the most rigid and permanent structure of our cell. Here, the largest of our structures, this is the microtubule that our organelles, such as right here, our mitochondria. Here's a little bit of rough endoplasmic reticulum. It's as an anchor. These oops, sorry. These can also reassemble and disassemble depending on where we need the track. So there's my microfilaments. Here's my most permanent part, the micro or the intermediate fibers. And here's the largest, but providing a railway track, my microtubules. So this is a fabulous picture to kind of get yourself oriented as to where they are and what they're doing. Now we're going to talk about the tiny organs, the organelles, which literally defines as little organs. Now these little organelles, remember our cells have the glycocalyx on the cell membrane that helps identify other cells. We just talked about that at length in the beginning. We had our chemical signaling, our contact signaling. It is a sugar protein coating that allows for identification. The reason why things like parasites and viruses and bacteria are so successful at hiding if they can get into one of these cells is because none of these contain a glycocalyx. The cell pretty much assumes if I have something inside of me, it's supposed to be there. Because we have an immune system, we have the safeguards of the outer glycocalyx, we have the complexity of the cell membrane. All of these should provide sufficient barrier to prevent stuff from getting into the cell that is not supposed to be there. The problem is it is not infallible, and we do have things that can penetrate and live successfully inside the cell. And the reason why it doesn't get targeted as stranger danger is because once it's inside there, it's assumed it's supposed to be there. There's an incredibly successful blood parasite that uses this to its advantage called malaria. Malaria, did you all know malaria was a blood parasite? Some of you are like, yeah, some of you are looking at me like I have no idea what words are coming out of your mouth right now.
That's why we have gin and tonic. It was the first malaria medicine.
Really?
Are you serious? Yeah, gin comes from like some special tree in South America, and they realized it was like poisonous to like the blood parasite.
Shut up. That's the thing I learned today. I learned something new every single day. That's the first thing that I've learned today. But what malaria does is it sneaks into the cells. And it just lives there and it proliferates and breeds and breeds and breeds and breeds and breeds. And meanwhile, the body is no worse for wear. It's like, I don't see anything, burr, burr, burr. Until all of the cells burst and like billions and billions of malaria bugs, parasites, go flooding through the course of the body and take over and kill you. Super, super dangerous. But this is my whole point behind that is none of these organelles have that same glycocalyx because they don't need it. They assume if you're in there, you're supposed to be in there. Some of our organelles that we'll be discussing, we have our mitochondria, which is that was pitiful and sad. Let's try it one more time. Mitochondria is the
powerhouse of the cell.
Better, still sad and pitiful. We have ribosomes. We've already heard this word before in when we were talking about our RNA. We had our RNA, which was ribosomal. So this is where we get a piece of an instruction and we go and we find like a ticker tape and the ribosome reads it and can reconstruct. The ribosomes are like our little factories. The Golgi apparatus, sometimes we also call it the Golgi body. You don't have to be furiously writing all of the things coming out of my mouth right now. I'm giving you a handshake, how do you do to end the class so we have a place to pick up tomorrow. Golgi apparatus or the Golgi body is the FedEx UPS store. His whole job is to package, repackage, and ship stuff. That's it. Our endoplasmic reticulum, or our ER, comes in two different forms, rough and smooth. It's a continuation of our nucleus. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum is what acts like your kidneys. It helps to detoxify things. And the rough is rough because it's where we are anchoring and creating more ribosomes. It looks like Braille. We have our lysosome, which to lyse something means what? To lyse means to break down. And so if I have a lysosome, this is the thing that's going to help, like a stomach, carry around acid and help to break down things that need to be removed. And peroxisomes, these are other little kind of digestive areas that help to take super toxic things and turn them into peroxide and eventually water. So we're going to discuss at length these particular organelles.
Nothing about proteasomes and vaults.
Do what?
Proteasomes and vaults. We're not gonna talk about those.
Vaults?
Yeah, those are in our books. Those are in our book. Vaults are transporting molecules to and from the nucleus. They're new.
Oh, so yeah, so vaults, we also refer to them as crypts, which was the little vacuole that we talked about yesterday. Movement to the cell membrane where we fuse with the phospholipid bilayer and release stuff outside, or we bring it in, pinch it off and bring it back down into the cell. So we'll discuss those, but not in a whole lot of detail. These are the primary just organelles that we're going to discuss. There are some other components that we will be discussing, but tomorrow we're going to focus on the organelles. All right, so time flies when we are having fun. Comments, questions, concerns?
I do have a question, Ms. Huff.
Can I what?
I do have a question.
Sure.
I can't make out what the third bullet point on organelles says. Like, I've tried to read through it, but I couldn't make out what it said.
The third bullet point, that they don't have a glycocalyx.
No, the one that says is separated from. I tried reading through it, but it kind of didn't make sense to me at all.
So it's not that you couldn't read it, it's that you didn't understand what you read. All this is saying is that it is separated by its own membrane. So we have our cytoplasm, which is this, oh, why am I pointing this out? I'm not even sharing this. There. So all that point was saying is that the inside of the cell is its own compartment. That's pretty much it. Just that the stuff inside the cell the inside is its own compartment, and it's a lot different than the environment on the outside of the cell.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we get going?